"You do not belong beyond this checkpoint, sir. Step away from the gate." The words stopped Captain Marcus Reed in mid-stride, only 40 feet from the secured crew entrance at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Wearing his Navy pilot uniform, polished black shoes, captain stripes, and company identification around his neck, he looked exactly like the flight crew members crossing the restricted corridor every morning. Yet 2 police officers had stepped directly into his path, while several airport employees slowed down to watch. Marcus remained calm. "I am the assigned captain for Flight 428 to Denver," he answered evenly, keeping both hands visible. "My crew is expecting me." One officer glanced at him briefly before shaking his head. "We have not verified that. Until we do, you are not going anywhere." The terminal around them continued moving with the familiar rhythm of rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, and hurried travelers. But inside the small circle surrounding Marcus, everything seemed frozen. He checked the large digital clock mounted above the security corridor. Boarding would begin in less than 25 minutes. Every minute lost here would place hundreds of passengers behind schedule. He knew exactly what was at stake, but arguing would only make the situation worse. "You can contact airport operations," Marcus said politely. "They can confirm my assignment immediately." The second officer folded his arms. "If you really worked here, you would not be asking us to make phone calls." Several travelers exchanged uncertain looks. One woman quietly whispered to the man beside her, while another passenger lifted a phone slightly before thinking better of recording the encounter. A gate agent standing nearby recognized the airline logo on Marcus's uniform but hesitated, unsure whether to intervene while police handled the situation. Marcus took a slow breath, refusing to let frustration reach his voice. 20 years of aviation had taught him that pressure revealed character faster than success ever could. He had guided aircraft through violent turbulence, mechanical warnings, and emergency diversions, always trusting training over emotion. This moment required exactly the same discipline. "Officer," he said calmly, "my first officer and cabin crew are already preparing the aircraft. They will be wondering where I am." "That is not our concern," came the immediate reply. "Right now, our concern is whether you are authorized to be here." Marcus noticed a baggage supervisor walking past. Their eyes met for only a second before the supervisor continued toward the ramp without saying anything. Nearby, 2 uniformed flight attendants slowed their pace, recognizing Marcus from previous trips, but they exchanged uncertain glances and continued toward another security lane after seeing the officers blocking him. The delay was becoming impossible to ignore. Inside the cockpit, pre-flight inspections depended on both pilots completing required checklists together before passengers boarded. Without the captain present, the carefully timed sequence that kept commercial aviation running smoothly would begin slipping minute by minute. Marcus resisted the temptation to point toward the aircraft visible through the terminal windows. He did not need to prove his profession through pride. He only needed someone willing to verify the facts. One officer reached toward his radio, while the other remained directly in front of Marcus, leaving no room to continue forward. Around them, conversations had grown quieter as more people sensed something unusual unfolding. No raised voices, no dramatic gestures, only an accomplished black pilot standing in full uniform being treated as though he had wandered into a place where he could not possibly belong. While somewhere beyond the checkpoint, an airplane waited for the captain everyone expected to arrive. Marcus stood exactly where he had been instructed, resisting every instinct to defend himself more forcefully. Years of flying had taught him that calm decisions saved lives, while emotional reactions often made difficult situations worse. He slowly removed his airline identification from the front of his uniform jacket and held it where both officers could read it without taking a single step closer. The plastic badge displayed his photograph, his employee number, and the word captain beneath the airline logo. One officer looked at it for barely a second before saying, "Anyone can make something that looks official." Marcus lowered the badge without arguing. "The identification can be scanned," he replied evenly. "Airport operations, crew scheduling, or airline security can all verify it in less than a minute." The officers exchanged a quick glance, but neither reached for the badge scanner mounted only a few feet away. Instead, one of them asked, "Why are you entering through the crew checkpoint instead of the public terminal?" Marcus answered with the same patient tone, "Because I am working. Pilots use this entrance before every scheduled flight. A baggage cart rolled past as two mechanics wearing reflective safety vests disappeared through another secured doorway. Both nodded politely toward Marcus before continuing on their assignments, apparently assuming the conversation would be resolved within moments. Instead, it continued growing stranger. The first officer opened a small notebook. "Tell us the flight number again." "Flight 428 to Denver." "Aircraft type?" "Boeing 737-800. "Scheduled departure?" 8:45 this morning. Marcus answered every question immediately, without hesitation. The responses came naturally after thousands of flights over 2 decades. His confidence was not rehearsed. It was simply the result of experience. Even so, the questions kept coming. "Who is your first officer?" Marcus answered with the correct name. "Lead flight attendant." He answered again. "Assigned departure gate?" Another immediate answer. Travelers walking nearby began slowing almost unconsciously. Some recognized the crisp airline uniform. Others simply noticed that someone dressed like a captain was being questioned as though he had wandered into a restricted area by accident. Several airport employees glanced toward the officers, then toward Marcus, quietly trying to understand what had happened. None of them interrupted. The authority represented by the police uniforms created an invisible barrier that discouraged anyone from stepping forward without being asked. Marcus checked the terminal clock once more. Less than 20 minutes remained before boarding. His first officer would already be completing preliminary cockpit setup, but federal procedures required both pilots to complete several critical verification steps together before passengers entered the aircraft. Every delay now carried consequences extending far beyond a single conversation. The officer holding the notebook finally looked up. "If everything you are saying is true, why has nobody come looking for you?" Marcus almost smiled, not because the question amused him, but because he understood aviation well enough to know the answer. "Because they still expect me to arrive. We build extra time into every schedule. That margin is disappearing." A nearby gate agent quietly approached another airline employee and whispered something while glancing repeatedly toward Marcus. Across the terminal, a pair of uniformed pilots from another airline walked through the same crew entrance without interruption after presenting their credentials. Marcus watched them disappear beyond the checkpoint. Neither officer seemed to notice the contrast. "Sir," Marcus said respectfully, "I am asking one more time that you contact airport operations. They have immediate access to crew manifests." Before either officer responded, a radio attached to one officer's shoulder crackled with routine dispatch traffic unrelated to the situation. They listened briefly before returning their attention to Marcus. "You can wait," one officer said. "We will decide what happens next." Marcus nodded once. "I will wait." His voice never changed. His posture remained straight. His expression revealed neither anger nor fear, only quiet professionalism. Deep inside, however, he could feel the growing weight of every passing minute. Hundreds of passengers would soon arrive expecting a routine departure. His crew would begin wondering why their captain had not appeared. Somewhere beyond the secured corridor, an aircraft fully prepared for flight remained motionless, not because of weather, maintenance, or mechanical difficulty, but because the one person responsible for leading that flight was still being treated like a stranger standing outside the very workplace where he had earned the right to belong. Marcus remained exactly where he was, his travel case resting neatly beside his polished shoes, while the activity of one of the busiest airports in America flowed around him as though two different realities existed only a few feet apart. Families hurried toward security with coffee cups and backpacks. Business travelers checked departure screens while answering emails. Flight attendants greeted one another with familiar smiles as they disappeared beyond the crew entrance. Every few seconds, another uniform crossed the checkpoint without interruption, making the contrast impossible to ignore for anyone paying attention. Marcus quietly watched the movement without allowing frustration to appear on his face. The officers continued standing between him and the secured corridor. One of them finally spoke into his shoulder radio, requesting additional information, but the brief exchange produced no immediate answer. Marcus knew enough about airport procedures to understand that the fastest solution had never been complicated. One call to airline operations or airport control could confirm his identity almost instantly. Instead, valuable minutes continued slipping away. Inside the terminal, the first boarding announcement for another nearby flight echoed through the public address system. Marcus instinctively glanced toward the large electronic departure board. His own flight still displayed an on-time departure. That meant passengers would soon begin arriving at the assigned gate, expecting everything to proceed normally. Behind the cockpit door, however, several mandatory tasks still required the captain's direct participation before boarding could continue. His first officer could prepare much of the aircraft, but some responsibilities simply could not be delegated. A middle-aged airport employee wearing a maintenance badge approached slowly from another corridor. He recognized Marcus immediately and smiled politely before noticing the officers blocking the pathway. His smile disappeared. "Captain Reed?" he asked carefully. Marcus nodded. "Good morning, David." The maintenance technician looked from Marcus to the officers. "Is everything all right?" Before Marcus could answer, one officer stepped forward. "Official police business." David hesitated for a moment. "He flies out of here all the time." The officer replied politely but firmly. "Thank you, sir. We are handling the situation." David looked back at Marcus with visible uncertainty. Marcus simply gave him a small, reassuring nod, silently asking him not to argue. Understanding the message, David quietly continued toward the secured area, although he glanced back twice before disappearing through the doorway. The brief encounter left an impression on everyone nearby. If airport employees recognized this man as their captain, why was he still standing outside the checkpoint? A young couple waiting nearby exchanged puzzled expressions. An older traveler quietly folded his newspaper and continued watching without saying a word. Even one of the airline customer service representatives standing behind the nearby service desk appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Marcus remained composed. He had spent years mentoring younger pilots, often reminding them that professionalism meant behaving with integrity even when nobody seemed willing to offer the same respect in return. Those lessons were now being tested in a way he had never expected. The first officer looked toward Marcus again. "Do you have any other identification?" Marcus reached slowly into his wallet after receiving permission and produced his Federal Aviation Administration airline transport pilot certificate. He held it carefully where both officers could examine every detail without taking it from his hands. The official document contained his name, certification, and authorization to operate commercial aircraft. One officer studied it longer than the airline badge, but still did not appear convinced. "This does not prove you are assigned to a flight today." Marcus answered calmly. "No, but airport control can." The response was simple, respectful, and impossible to misunderstand. Another few seconds passed before the officer finally lifted his radio once again. This time his tone became more specific as he requested verification through airport operations. Marcus did not celebrate the decision. He simply waited. Around them, conversations softened as curious travelers sensed that something important was unfolding. Some people who had initially assumed the officers must have been correct were beginning to reconsider after watching Marcus answer every question without hesitation, present multiple forms of legitimate identification, and remain unfailingly courteous throughout the encounter. The atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly. Doubt had started changing direction. For the first time since being stopped, the uncertainty no longer surrounded the black pilot, standing calmly in uniform. It had begun surrounding the decision to keep him from the cockpit he had been preparing to command. The officer lowered the radio after requesting verification, but no answer came immediately. The silence stretched longer than Marcus expected, measured not by seconds, but by everything happening around him. Another departure announcement echoed through the terminal. A family carrying matching vacation backpacks hurried toward security. A pilot from another airline nodded politely as he entered the crew corridor without interruption. Life inside the airport continued with remarkable precision, while Marcus remained standing only a few feet away from the doorway he had walked through hundreds of times during his career. He glanced once more toward the departure board. Boarding for Flight 428 would begin soon if it had not already started. His first officer was undoubtedly completing every preparation possible alone, carefully following standard operating procedures while wondering why the captain had not arrived. Marcus understood exactly what his colleague would be thinking. Professional flight crews trusted one another completely. If someone was missing, there had to be a serious reason. Still, There was no practical way for the first officer to know that the delay was unfolding only a short walk from the aircraft. One of the officers broke the silence. "How long have you been flying?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "Just over 22 years. 22. The officer repeated, sounding almost surprised. "Yes, sir. Military before the airlines?" "No. Civil aviation from the beginning. Flight instructor first, then regional airlines, then captain after additional certifications and flight hours." His answer was straightforward and carried no trace of pride. It was simply the path he had followed through years of discipline, study, and responsibility. Every certificate he had earned represented countless examinations, simulator evaluations, medical clearances, and thousands of safe flight hours. None of those accomplishments had been mentioned until someone asked directly. Nearby, a young airport operations trainee quietly approached the customer service counter. The employee behind the counter leaned closer and whispered something while briefly pointing toward Marcus. The trainee looked at the captain, then at the officers, then toward the secured corridor as if trying to understand why the situation remained unresolved. Neither of them interfered. They simply continued observing. Marcus noticed another familiar face emerging from the corridor. It was one of the senior gate supervisors who had coordinated departures with him many times over the years. The supervisor recognized Marcus immediately and lifted a hand in greeting before slowing to a stop after noticing the officers. Confusion crossed his face. "Captain Reed," he called politely from several yards away. Marcus returned the greeting with a calm nod. Before either man could continue the conversation, one officer turned toward the supervisor. "Please remain where you are." The supervisor complied immediately. "Is there a problem?" "We are verifying his authorization." The supervisor blinked in disbelief but kept his voice respectful. "He is scheduled today." One officer answered without changing expression. "We are already handling it." The supervisor hesitated. Marcus met his eyes for only a second and gave the slightest shake of his head. It was enough. The supervisor understood that escalating the conversation in public would likely delay everything further. He stepped aside but remained within sight, clearly unwilling to leave until the matter was resolved. The growing number of witnesses changed the atmosphere without anyone saying so aloud. People were beginning to connect small details that did not fit together. Experienced airport employees recognized Marcus. His uniform matched every other captain entering the crew area. His identification appeared genuine. His answers had remained immediate and consistent from the beginning. Most striking of all, his composure never changed. There was no hostility, no raised voice, no attempt to push past the officers. Only patient cooperation. One traveler quietly remarked to his companion, "If he was pretending, he knows an awful lot." Marcus heard the comment but kept his attention on the officers. He had learned long ago that reputation was not built through dramatic moments. It was built through steady choices repeated over many years. Right now, his only responsibility was to continue making the next correct choice. At that moment, the radio attached to the officer's shoulder emitted a sharp tone. Both officers immediately turned toward it. A dispatcher announced that airport operations had begun checking the crew manifest and requested that everyone remain in place while verification was completed. The words were calm and procedural, but they changed the direction of the entire encounter. For the first time since Marcus had been stopped, the question was no longer whether he belonged there. The question had become how quickly the official records would confirm what he had been saying from the very beginning. The terminal grew noticeably quieter around Marcus, even though thousands of people continued moving through the building. Curiosity had replaced certainty. The officers no longer questioned him every few seconds. Instead, all attention shifted toward the radio that had become the center of the unfolding moment. Marcus remained still, one hand resting lightly on the handle of his flight case, his expression calm and patient. He had spent his career waiting for checklists to be completed before making important decisions. Waiting was part of aviation. Today, however, every passing second carried a different kind of weight. Across the terminal, the gate supervisor remained in sight, pretending to review paperwork while keeping Marcus within view. The maintenance technician who had recognized him earlier walked back through the public area and quietly stopped several yards away. Neither man interrupted the officers, but their presence spoke for itself. They knew exactly who Marcus was. They simply trusted that official verification would eventually reach the same conclusion. The radio suddenly came alive again with a clear electronic tone. The officer closest to Marcus immediately pressed the transmit button. "Go ahead." A calm professional voice answered from airport operations. "Stand by for crew verification." The officer acknowledged the message. Another brief silence followed. Marcus looked once toward the departure board. Flight 428 still showed an on-time departure, but the boarding status had changed. Passengers would already be gathering near the gate. His first officer would now be checking the time between every completed procedure, wondering how much longer the captain's arrival could reasonably be delayed before someone higher in the airline would need to be notified. Marcus understood the pressure his crew must be feeling. Commercial aviation depended on precision, communication, and trust. Every member of the team relied upon the others fulfilling their responsibilities. He wished he could simply tell them that he was only a few hundred feet away. The radio crackled again. This time the voice spoke without hesitation. Airport operations to responding officers. The individual being detained has been positively identified as Captain Marcus Reed. Repeat, Captain Marcus Reed is the assigned pilot in command for Flight 428 departing this morning. His credentials are valid. His airport access is fully authorized. Please allow immediate passage to the secured crew area. The words echoed through the radio with unmistakable clarity. Nobody spoke for several seconds afterward. The officer holding the radio slowly lowered his hand. His partner looked toward Marcus, then toward the identification badge still hanging neatly from the captain's uniform. Around them, the silence itself became the loudest sound in the terminal. The gate supervisor quietly released a breath he had apparently been holding for several minutes. The maintenance technician gave a small nod before looking away respectfully. Several nearby travelers exchanged surprised expressions. One elderly passenger quietly murmured. He told them that from the beginning. Marcus did not move. He did not smile. He did not display relief or satisfaction. He simply waited for the officers to finish processing the information they had just received. A moment later, the same voice returned over the radio. Airport control also advises that boarding preparations are already underway. Flight operations request that Captain Reed proceed directly to his aircraft without further delay. The message removed every remaining question. The officer nearest Marcus cleared his throat before speaking for the first time with a noticeably different tone. "Captain Reed." He paused briefly, choosing his words more carefully than before. "You are cleared to continue." Marcus gave a polite nod. "Thank you, officer." There was no sarcasm, no anger, no attempt to embarrass anyone standing nearby. He simply reached for the handle of his flight case. Before taking his first step toward the secured corridor, he looked once toward the small gathering of airport employees who had quietly witnessed everything. Their expressions had changed completely. What had begun as uncertainty had become unmistakable respect. Without another word, Marcus walked forward at the same steady pace he had maintained throughout the morning. The officers stepped aside. The secured door opened. Beyond it waited the aircraft, his crew, and hundreds of passengers who would never know how close their captain had come to missing the flight because the truth had taken far longer to verify than the assumptions that had delayed it. Captain Marcus Reed crossed the secured doorway without changing his pace, as though the previous 20 minutes had been nothing more than another unexpected delay in a profession built around solving problems calmly. The gate supervisor met him only a few steps inside the restricted corridor. "Captain, we have been trying to figure out what happened," he said with obvious relief. Marcus offered a reassuring smile. "Everything has been verified. We should still have enough time." The supervisor nodded immediately and walked beside him toward the operations hallway. "Your first officer has the aircraft nearly ready. Everyone has been waiting for you." Marcus thanked him quietly and continued forward. The familiar sounds of airport operations surrounded him once again. Ground crew members coordinated equipment movements over their radios. Flight attendants reviewed final paperwork. Mechanics completed routine inspections before stepping away from the aircraft. Everything operated with the precision that commercial aviation demanded every single day. As Marcus entered the jet bridge, one of the flight attendants looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Captain. We were beginning to wonder if traffic had somehow reached the airport." Marcus gave a gentle laugh. The morning became a little more complicated than expected. She noticed the tired expression in his eyes, but chose not to press for details. Professional crews understood that some conversations could wait until the work was finished. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Daniel Brooks looked up from the overhead panel with visible relief. "There you are. I was about to call operations." Marcus placed his flight case beside his seat. That would have been the right decision. Daniel studied his captain's face for a moment. "Everything all right?" Marcus fastened his headset before answering. "Everything is resolved now." The first officer accepted the answer without further questions. Years of working together had built trust that did not require lengthy explanations during critical moments. Both pilots immediately turned their attention to the aircraft. Checklists resumed exactly where they had paused. Hydraulic systems, navigation displays, flight management computers, weather information, fuel calculations, departure routing, and communication frequencies were reviewed with practiced precision. Every response came smoothly, each item confirmed by both pilots before moving to the next. Outside the cockpit windows, baggage containers disappeared into the cargo hold while the last catering vehicle pulled away from the aircraft. The organized rhythm of aviation quickly replaced the uncertainty of the terminal. Yet Marcus could not completely erase the memory of standing only a short distance away while repeatedly explaining that he belonged there. He did not allow the experience to affect his concentration. Hundreds of passengers would soon trust him with their safety. They deserved his complete attention. Moments later, the boarding door opened as the lead flight attendant stepped inside. "Captain, boarding is complete. 156 passengers on board. Cabin secure." Marcus acknowledged the report with his usual calm professionalism. Daniel glanced toward him before speaking softly. "You always tell new pilots that the first responsibility of a captain is to bring calm into the cockpit." Marcus smiled faintly. "That lesson applies every day." Pushback clearance arrived from ground control only minutes later. The tug connected to the aircraft. Engines started normally. Every instrument displayed exactly what it should. As the aircraft began moving away from the gate, Marcus looked briefly through the side window toward the terminal building. Somewhere behind those walls, the officers had already returned to their routine assignments. The travelers who had witnessed the encounter had likely continued toward their own destinations. For most of them, the morning would soon become another passing memory. For Marcus, however, the experience would remain much longer, not because someone had questioned him, but because every answer he had offered from the very beginning had been true. During taxi, the control tower cleared them toward the active runway with the same professional voice heard thousands of times each day. Nothing in that exchange reflected what had happened less than an hour earlier. In the eyes of air traffic control, there was only one fact that mattered. Captain Marcus Reed was exactly where he was supposed to be, commanding the aircraft assigned to him. As the airplane accelerated down the runway and lifted smoothly into the morning sky, the city below grew smaller beneath the wings. Inside the cabin, passengers settled into their seats, unaware that the calm voice welcoming them aboard belonged to a man whose professionalism had quietly overcome suspicion without raising his own voice even once. At 37,000 feet, the cockpit settled into its familiar rhythm. The aircraft cruised smoothly above a blanket of white clouds stretching across the morning sky, and every instrument displayed exactly what Marcus expected to see. His hands rested lightly on the controls while Daniel monitored the flight management system beside him. For several peaceful minutes, neither pilot spoke. Years of experience had taught them that silence inside the cockpit was often a sign that everything was working exactly as designed. Finally, Daniel looked across with quiet curiosity. "I know you said everything was resolved, but I have never seen you arrive that close to departure. Was it something serious?" Marcus considered the question before answering. "It was serious enough to delay the flight, but not serious enough to change how we do our job." Daniel nodded patiently, allowing Marcus to continue only if he wished. After another moment, Marcus spoke. "I was stopped before the crew entrance. They questioned whether I belonged in the secured area." Daniel frowned. "Even with your uniform and identification?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Those were not enough this morning." Daniel leaned back slightly, surprised. He had flown beside Marcus for almost 6 years. He had watched passengers thank him after difficult weather, new first officers seek his advice, and maintenance crews greet him by name at airports across the country. To imagine someone looking at the same captain and seeing anything other than an experienced airline pilot seemed almost impossible. "What happened after that?" Daniel asked quietly. Marcus kept his eyes on the instruments while answering. Airport operations confirmed everything through the crew manifest. After that, I came here. Daniel remained silent for several seconds. You stayed calm. Marcus gave a thoughtful nod. I had two choices. I could focus on proving that I was angry, or I could focus on proving that I belonged there. Only one of those would help anyone. The words stayed with Daniel as the aircraft continued westward. He realized that his captain had demonstrated the very lesson he often taught younger crews during training. Professionalism was not measured on easy days when everyone treated you fairly. It was measured on difficult days when character was tested without warning. A soft chime interrupted the conversation as the lead flight attendant called from the cabin. Captain, everything is going well back here. Passengers are comfortable. We have one young traveler who asked if he could meet the pilots after landing. His parents said it is his first flight. Marcus smiled. Please let them know we would be happy to meet him once we arrive. I will let them know, she replied warmly before ending the call. Daniel glanced toward Marcus with a small smile. That kid has no idea what happened before takeoff. Marcus looked through the windshield toward the endless blue horizon. And I hope he never has to. Another hour passed as they monitored weather reports, adjusted their routing slightly around light turbulence, and coordinated with different air traffic control sectors. Everything unfolded exactly as a routine commercial flight should. Inside the passenger cabin, families watched movies, business travelers worked quietly on laptops, and children looked out the windows at the clouds below. None of them realized that the calm atmosphere surrounding them depended on a captain who had chosen dignity over resentment only a short time earlier. As the aircraft approached the beginning of its descent into Denver, Marcus made his standard announcement over the public address system. His voice was steady, welcoming, and reassuring. He thanked everyone for flying with the airline, explained that smooth weather awaited them on arrival, and wished them an enjoyable stay in Colorado. The announcement sounded no different from the thousands he had made throughout his career. When he finished, Daniel looked at him again. You would never know what kind of morning you had. Marcus adjusted the arrival chart before answering. Passengers deserve the best version of us, not the hardest part of our day. Daniel quietly smiled. In that single sentence, his captain had summarized a lifetime of leadership. Long after the misunderstanding at the airport would fade from memory, that lesson would remain, carried forward not through speeches or headlines, but through the quiet example of a man who understood that true authority was never proven by raising his voice. It was proven by never allowing someone else's assumptions to take away the discipline, dignity, and professionalism he had spent decades earning. The aircraft touched down smoothly in Denver exactly as scheduled, the landing so gentle that several passengers barely looked up from their books and laptops. As the engine slowed and the airplane rolled toward the arrival gate, Marcus completed the final checklist with the same steady focus that had guided every stage of the flight. Nothing in his voice or movements suggested that only a few hours earlier he had been prevented from reaching the very cockpit where he now sat. Once the aircraft reached the gate and the seatbelt signs switched off, passengers began gathering their belongings with the familiar mixture of relief and anticipation that marked the end of every successful journey. The lead flight attendant stepped into the cockpit with a warm smile. Captain, the young passenger and his parents are waiting just outside the cockpit door if you still have a moment. Marcus looked toward Daniel and smiled. Of course. After completing the remaining shutdown procedures, both pilots stepped into the forward galley. Waiting there was a boy who appeared to be about 9 years old, wearing a small aviation museum sweatshirt and holding a model airplane carefully against his chest. His eyes immediately grew wide with excitement. Are you really the captain? He asked. Marcus smiled warmly. Yes, I am. The boy looked at the uniform, then toward the cockpit behind Marcus. That is the coolest job in the world. His parents laughed softly. He has wanted to become a pilot since kindergarten, his mother explained. Marcus knelt slightly so they could speak at eye level. Then keep learning, keep asking questions, and never stop believing you belong wherever your hard work takes you. The boy nodded eagerly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Were you ever scared learning to fly? Marcus considered the question for a moment before answering honestly. Everyone feels uncertain when learning something important. What matters is showing up prepared every day and never letting difficult moments decide who you are. The boy smiled as though committing every word to memory. His father thanked Marcus before asking if they could take a quick photograph together. Marcus gladly agreed. Daniel offered to take the picture, and a few seconds later the family walked away with grateful smiles. As the terminal gradually emptied, the station manager approached the cockpit entrance carrying a tablet. "Captain Reed, do you have a few minutes before your hotel transportation arrives?" Marcus nodded. "Certainly." The manager's expression was sincere. "Airport operations contacted us during your flight. They informed us about what happened before departure this morning. They also said the incident is already being reviewed through normal administrative procedures." Marcus listened quietly without interrupting. "They wanted us to know because your professionalism was specifically mentioned during the report," the manager continued. "Several employees described how respectfully you handled the entire situation." Marcus lowered his eyes briefly before answering. "I appreciate you telling me." The manager smiled. "For what it is worth, your crew speaks very highly of you." Today only confirmed why. After the manager left, Daniel gathered his flight bag and looked toward Marcus. "You know, the passengers will remember a smooth flight. That little boy will remember meeting his first captain. The airport employees will remember how you handled yourself." It seems like everyone took away something different from today. Marcus looked back through the open cockpit door one final time before switching off the last remaining display. "I hope the most important lesson is that verifying facts should always come before forming conclusions." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Together, they walked through the quiet terminal toward the employee exit, passing airport workers who greeted Marcus with familiar smiles and respectful nods. Word of the morning's events had already begun spreading quietly through professional circles, not as a dramatic confrontation, but as an example of calm leadership under unnecessary pressure. Marcus returned every greeting with the same quiet kindness he always had. He understood that one difficult encounter should never become the measure of an entire community. Yet he also knew that every respectful conversation, every careful decision, and every fair verification could help ensure that the next qualified professional arriving in uniform would be recognized first by experience, preparation, and character rather than by assumptions that should never have replaced the truth. Several weeks passed before Captain Marcus Reed returned to the same airport for another early morning departure. His schedule had continued exactly as before, filled with pre-flight briefings, cross-country routes, weather planning, simulator reviews, and the countless responsibilities that came with leading commercial flights safely across the country. He had never spoken publicly about the morning he had been delayed outside the crew entrance. He had not posted about it online, accepted interviews, or tried to turn the experience into something larger than it already was. To him, flying remained the mission. Everything else came second. As he entered the terminal that morning, familiar airport employees greeted him with genuine smiles. The maintenance technician waved from across the concourse. The gate's supervisor shook his hand before heading toward another departure. Even several Transportation Security Administration officers who had worked alongside airport staff for years nodded respectfully as Marcus walked past. There was a quiet sense that something had changed. Not because Marcus had demanded recognition, but because people who had witnessed that earlier morning had carried the memory with them. They remembered the calm voice. They remembered the patience. Most of all, they remembered that every fact he had shared had been accurate from the very beginning. Near the secured entrance, Marcus noticed one of the officers involved in the previous encounter. The officer recognized him immediately and walked forward with a composed expression. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. Finally, the officer extended his hand. "Captain Reed, I have been hoping I would have the opportunity to see you again." Marcus accepted the handshake without hesitation. "Good morning, officer." The officer took a careful breath before continuing. "I wanted to tell you personally that I have spent a great deal of time thinking about what happened that morning. Our department completed its review, and additional training has already been scheduled regarding verification procedures before assumptions are made. I also wanted to thank you for remaining professional throughout the entire situation. You gave us the opportunity to correct our mistake." Marcus listened quietly before answering. "I appreciate you saying that." The officer nodded. "I cannot change that morning, but I can make sure I carry the lesson forward." Marcus smiled warmly. "That is all any of us can do." There was no bitterness in his voice, only sincerity. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, yet everyone nearby could sense its importance. It was not about winning or losing. It was about choosing growth over pride. As Marcus continued toward the crew entrance, the badge scanner accepted his identification with a single soft tone. The secured door opened immediately. This time there were no questions, no hesitation, only the routine beginning of another workday. A young trainee standing nearby watched Marcus disappear into the restricted corridor before quietly asking a senior employee, "Is that Captain Reed?" The older employee smiled. "Yes, one of the best captains you will ever meet." The trainee nodded thoughtfully. "He seems very humble." The employee answered, "The best professionals usually are." Later that afternoon, after another safe flight and another routine landing, Marcus once again welcomed passengers as they left the aircraft. The young aviation enthusiast he had met weeks earlier was not among them, but dozens of other travelers thanked him with smiles, kind words, and simple appreciation for getting them safely to their destination. Each farewell reminded Marcus why he had chosen aviation decades earlier. Flying had never been about uniforms, titles, or prestige. It had always been about responsibility. As he gathered his flight bag and prepared to leave the aircraft, Daniel looked over with a familiar smile. "Another successful day, Captain." Marcus nodded. "Exactly the way we like them." Together, they walked through the quiet jet bridge toward the terminal, where another crew was already preparing the aircraft for its next journey. The cycle would continue tomorrow, and the day after that, carried forward by professionals committed to doing their jobs well. Some passengers would remember the smooth landing. Others would remember the friendly captain who welcomed them aboard. A young child somewhere might remember that meeting a pilot suddenly made an impossible dream feel reachable. And perhaps a few people would remember something even more important. Uniforms can be recognized in an instant. Character takes longer to see. But when people choose facts before assumptions, professionalism before prejudice, and respect before judgment, every journey begins on the right course long before the airplane ever leaves the ground.